This pill costs $4 to manufacture. It retails for over $4,000 a month in the United States. The patent on it is 40 years old. None of that is an accident. What you're about to hear isn't a story about corporate greed. Greed is too simple an explanation. This is a story about architecture. The deliberate, methodical construction of legal systems designed to look like free markets while functioning as something closer to feudalism, where the land isn't soil, it's intellectual property. And the serfs are anyone who needs medicine, or technology, or access to an idea that someone else had first, and never intends to release. The US patent system was codified in 1790. The mechanism was elegant. Disclose your invention to the public in full, and in exchange, receive 20 years of exclusive commercial rights. After those 2 decades, the patent expires. The invention enters the public domain. Competition begins. Prices fall. Society absorbs the knowledge permanently. The founders understood, without ambiguity, that monopolies were corrosive. They had just fought a revolution against one. So they built an expiration date into the system, a forced sunset on exclusivity. Innovation would be rewarded, but not indefinitely. That architecture has been quietly dismantled. Not through legislation, not through any single dramatic act, but through the patient, incremental exploitation of every procedural gap the system contains, pursued by legal departments with unlimited budgets and decades of institutional memory. Consider AbbVie and Humira. Humira is a biologic used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, and psoriasis. It's been the best-selling pharmaceutical product in the world for over a decade. AbbVie's foundational patent on its active compound expired in 2016. Generic manufacturers had spent years and hundreds of millions of dollars preparing biosimilar versions. The law was unambiguous. The monopoly was over. They could not enter the market. By 2016, AbbVie had constructed a portfolio of 257 distinct patents surrounding Humira, not on new drugs, not on new mechanisms of action, on the same molecule, a new dosing concentration, a prefilled syringe, a citrate-free formulation, an autoinjector cap, each patent individually minor, collectively, an exclusionary perimeter that no competitor could cross without triggering litigation that AbbVie, with $20 billion in annual revenue, was fully equipped to sustain indefinitely. Biosimilar manufacturers faced a binary choice: litigate for years against a company with unlimited legal resources over a syringe cap, or negotiate a delayed entry agreement and wait. Most waited. Humira remained uncontested in the United States until 2023, 7 years past expiration. In that interval, AbbVie generated over $100 billion in revenue from a single product whose core intellectual property had legally ceased to be theirs. The strategy is called a patent thicket, and Humira is not the exception, it's the model. The pharmaceutical industries formalized this approach under a term that is almost admirably clinical: evergreening. The process involves filing secondary patents on peripheral attributes of an existing product, extended release formulations, alternative salt forms, new delivery mechanisms, to maintain exclusivity beyond the original term. The modifications are rarely clinically significant. A citrate-free formulation reduces injection site discomfort marginally. An autoinjector is a convenience feature. Neither warrants, in any honest reading of the patent system's intent, 20 additional years of monopoly pricing. But intent isn't law. Procedure is law. Legal teams at major pharmaceutical companies operate as long-range strategic planners. A drug entering phase 3 trials already has a patent lifecycle map, projecting primary expiration, secondary filings, potential litigation, and negotiated entry agreements extending exclusivity as far as 30 or 40 years from initial launch. The 20-year clock the founders designed has become a floor, not a ceiling. The technology sector presents a structurally different but equally systemic problem. In 2012, a company called Vringo pursued litigation against Google over patents covering search result ranking methodology. Vringo hadn't developed the technology. It had acquired the patents from AOL, which had itself acquired them through a chain of transactions. Vringo's business wasn't search, it was litigation. The patents were the product. This is the operating principle of the non-practicing entity, the patent troll. These firms hold intellectual property not to build with it, but to extract value from those who are. They acquire broad or ambiguous patents through bankruptcy auctions and distressed asset sales, then deploy them against operating companies through demands calibrated precisely to the cost of defense. A patent infringement lawsuit, even a meritless one, costs a defendant $3 to $5 million in legal fees before trial. Most defendants settle. The settlement's cheaper than the litigation. The troll collects and files again. In 2022, non-practicing entities accounted for over 60% of all patent litigation in the United States. The aggregate cost exceeded $60 billion. That capital generated no product, no service, no innovation. It transferred cleanly from operating companies to entities whose sole function was its extraction. The geographic concentration of this litigation is not random. The Eastern District of Texas, seated in Marshall, a city of approximately 23,000, processes a disproportionate share of the nation's patent cases. Local procedural rules impose aggressive discovery timelines that favor plaintiffs. Jury pools have historically returned large verdicts. Defendants' standard tools for transferring cases to neutral venues have been routinely restricted. Patent trolls file in Marshall because Marshall is where they win. The defendant's actual connection to East Texas is irrelevant. This is forum shopping, selecting the jurisdiction most likely to return a favorable ruling, and despite decades of documentation, the system is not structurally corrected for it. But forum shopping is a misdemeanor compared to what corporate defense counsel developed next. The Texas two-step is a bankruptcy maneuver under Texas divisional merger law that allows a solvent corporation facing mass tort liability to isolate its legal exposure entirely. The mechanics are deliberate. The parent creates a subsidiary, executes a divisional merger transferring all litigation liability into that entity, then immediately files it for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The automatic stay provision of the bankruptcy code halts all pending litigation against the subsidiary. The parent company retains its operating assets, revenue, and infrastructure. The claimants become unsecured creditors in a bankruptcy proceeding. Johnson & Johnson executed this in October 2021 in response to approximately 100,000 pending lawsuits alleging its talc products cause mesothelioma and ovarian cancer. The subsidiary, LTL Management, was created and filed for bankruptcy within 48 hours. Johnson & Johnson's market capitalization at the time exceeded $430 billion. The Third Circuit ultimately dismissed the petition, ruling that a company without genuine financial distress cannot invoke Chapter 11 as a litigation shield. Johnson & Johnson refiled. That attempt was also rejected. What matters is not the outcome. What matters is the interval. From filing to final rejection spanned years during which plaintiffs could not litigate, evidence aged, and some claimants died. The strategy, even in failure, functioned as designed. It delayed accountability at a cost that a $430 billion company absorbs without structural consequence. The cumulative effect on public welfare is quantifiable. The United States spends approximately $1,400 per capita annually on prescription pharmaceuticals, roughly double the per capita expenditure of Germany, Canada, or the United Kingdom. The differential is not attributable to superior outcomes. American patients don't live longer or recover faster. It's attributable, in substantial part, to the absence of effective constraints on secondary patent filings and the structural weakness of agencies charged with challenging trivially obvious patents at issuance. Insulin is the most instructive case. The underlying molecule was isolated in 1921. Banting and Best sold the patent to the University of Toronto for $1, because a therapy necessary for survival should not be subject to private monopoly. Current US retail price for an insulin analog, up to $300 per vial. Manufacturing cost, approximately $6. The same products sell in Canada for under $30. The gap between $6 and $300 is not R&D recovery. It's patent portfolios, delivery device patents, formulation patents, systematic, legally defensible exclusivity constructed around a molecule in the public domain for over a century. $1, 1921. The intention was permanence. $300, today. The mechanism is strategy. Reform exists at the margins. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 granted Medicare the authority to negotiate drug prices directly, a power every comparable national health system exercises as standard policy, and one the United States explicitly prohibited for 2 decades. The FTC's increased scrutiny on pharmaceutical patent settlements. Supreme Court decisions in Alice and Mayo have narrowed the patentability of abstract ideas, reducing some troll litigation models. These are adjustments, not transformations. The pharmaceutical industry spends over $350 million annually on federal lobbying, more than defense, more than oil and gas, more than any other commercial sector. That investment doesn't fund innovation. It funds the preservation of conditions that make innovation permanently profitable. Patent law was built with an expiration date because the underlying principle was sound. Ideas aren't property in the way that land is property. They can't be depleted. Their social utility multiplies when shared. The 20-year monopoly was a concession to the economics of invention, not a recognition of perpetual private right. What's been constructed in its place is a system where the clock resets indefinitely. Liability disappears across jurisdictional lines, and the agencies charged with oversight are outspent by their subjects by orders of magnitude. The patent was designed as the beginning of competition. It's been engineered into the instrument of its prevention. Until these mechanisms are named with precision, the thicket, the evergreen, the two-step, the troll, the architecture cannot be challenged. And until it's challenged, the price of a $4 pill will remain $4,000. Not by accident, by design.